You are listening to the Icehouse Podcast, hosting conversations with gritty Kiwi business owners and leaders and industry-leading minds.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Icehouse Podcast. My name's Priya and I'm excited to bring you another episode of the Icehouse Podcast with one of our wonderful co-working residents, Debbie. So welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Thank you.
I'd love to start off by just asking you to share a little bit about yourself and tell us who's Debbie.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of hard not to overthink that question, to be honest. There's one part of me that wants to go, quite deep on who I am. But I'll try not to have an existential meltdown while I answer that question. I might just stick to the facts. So, grew up in Auckland, went to uni, headed off overseas, travelled through India, Africa and Europe for 5 years. Wow. Had a patriality visa, so I was allowed to work overseas. So I got into corporate banking and did some work in London and Edinburgh.
Wow.
And on my overseas travels, I picked up a husband, brought him back to live in New Zealand with me, and we're now married, and I have 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and I'm also the founder of an organisation called BlueSkyMinds.
Yeah, excited to chat about that more later.
Yeah. A couple of the things that I'm really interested in at the moment are I love having chats with my teenage daughter and her friends. It's really hard being a teenager at the moment, and especially a teenage girl, and there's a lot of challenges that they face. And just right now, I've got some of her mates that I'm a little bit of an agony aunt to, and I really love the conversations that I have with them and supporting them, and just trying to overcome some of the obstacles that teenage girls face.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool to have someone in your life like that, especially at that age. So, good on you.
Yes, well, unfortunately, my kids don't necessarily take my advice.
Well, that's always a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I kind of joke about it with my friends because when it comes to, receiving advice, I joke that my kids have got a strategy called ABM, which is called anyone but mum. But actually what I've found is in terms of influencing young people, especially my daughter who's quite strong-willed, is telling stories of my own lived experiences. Yeah. So what teenage life was like for me, the struggles that I faced and what I learned. Yeah. And you don't think they're listening, but they are. Yeah. And often she'll bring things up later, and I just find actually that's a really clever way to influence, just tell stories about your own childhood.
Yeah. Wow. Love that. That's awesome. The next question I wanted to ask is, tell us a bit about the organisation you founded and what you do for work.
Yeah, so I'm so passionate about the work that I do.
Yeah.
It's deeply rewarding. So a little bit of background. Some of your listeners may know about the HR technology company Fuel 50. So I worked for them for 5 years before founding BlueSkyMinds. They've done incredibly well. I think I was employee number 3 when I joined, and they've now got over 100 staff. Oh wow,
that's
globally.
Quite special.
Yeah, so I had an amazing ride with them for 5 years. Joe Mills was an incredible boss and mentor. But I knew I always wanted to do my own thing. I always had this dream to be self-employed.
Awesome.
And I finally plucked up the courage to do it 7 years ago. And I knew exactly what I wanted to offer, because as I was looking at the world getting faster, more complex, changing more rapidly and becoming more uncertain, the ability for people to manage their minds in the midst of that is absolutely fundamental.
Yep.
And organisations back then weren't doing a lot to support their people. There were things like, counselling services, which usually people, it's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff before they'll go and seek out a counsellor. Yeah. And so I wanted to do things that were really proactive, really empowering to support organisations, to help people to look after their minds like they look after their bodies. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about. So founded BlueSkyMinds. So our kind of what we do is we're sort of business to business. We mostly work with large organisations around their people strategy, and in particular supporting healthy minds and high performance in the workplace.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really, really cool. What year did you found that? your business?
Oh my goodness, 2016.
Wow.
That must be. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. Could you please give us some examples of the type of work you do with organisations?
I'd love to. And I think the best way to probably do that is to think about it in sort of 3 different levels. So if you imagine a pyramid, at that bottom level, the first thing we want to do is start to engage the audiences at the organisations that we work with. So they can get to know us and we can get to know them and see if there's a good fit. So we might go in and do like a 1-hour lunch and learn seminar, or we might do an event at a leadership offsite, or a speaking event, or something attached to Mental Health Awareness Week, or, you know, people will come back to work next year. It's about, you know, how can you optimise healthy minds and high performance to get back into the groove after the holidays. So we do a lot of those kind of one-off speaking events. And then if there's a good fit and organisations are enjoying working with us, and then we've kind of got that next level up on the pyramid, which we call train.
Yeah.
So we've developed over the last 7 years some really great programs that run over 4 to 8 weeks. And that's taking a deep dive into some of the science-based skills to manage your mind and wellbeing at work. And so we've got our foundation, which is a program called High Performing Minds, and that's actually based on an evidence-based mental skills training program that was developed by Oxford University. So myself and some of my trainers are qualified to teach that program, and we've delivered that consistently over the last 7 years. And that's probably our foundation kind of train offering. And then we've done a couple of offshoots of that. So we've got a shorter program called Cultivating Resilient Minds, which is for teams going through change.
Oh, yeah.
And we've also got something called the MAT Toolbox, which is short, sharp, practical learning for the contact centre teams, which are often hard for them to take long periods of time away from calls.
Right.
And then so that's the train level. And then the next level up is embed. So if you imagine at the top of the pyramid, what we want to do with embed is create internal capability. So what we are doing is training internal champs and leaders to deliver some of that content internally. And often there's amazing champions and organisations who would love to learn to facilitate wellbeing workshops. So we will coach and guide them to be able to deliver some of our short seminars and workshops.
Wow. Awesome. I love that. What does a day in your life look like?
Wow, yeah. I mean, one of the things I really do live by is setting myself up in the morning to optimise my own performance. That's really important to me. And I've been tinkering for a while with my morning routine. And obviously the kids are older now, so I have a bit more time in the mornings.
Yeah.
So what I've found is as soon as I wake up, I have to get out the front door.
Yeah.
And I'll either go for a brisk walk or a slow jog.
Yeah.
And that just sets me up so well physically for the day.
Awesome.
And then I've got a focused meditation practice of about 20 to 30 minutes each morning, and that I do that most work days.
Awesome.
That sets me up mentally for the day. And then if I've got time, I love sitting in the garden in the morning sun and having a coffee.
Wow.
So that's kind of that's pretty set in stone. And then my days are really variable. So often I'm in with clients delivering programs or mapping out strategy for upcoming work, or I'm in here with my team planning events and things.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. And going for a walk and just enjoying your coffee in the sun, it sounds so simple, but it makes a world of difference, I feel.
Well, it does for me, and I guess it's about people figuring out what those routines are that maximise their wellbeing and performance, and it's not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
I've just managed to find what works for me.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I've gotten into exercise a little bit more because that was a priority for me, but for me it's difficult to do it first thing in the morning, but straight after work that feels more natural for me and a bit more comfortable, and that's part of my routine. So yeah, I love hearing that that routine that's a part of your day. That's awesome. I'd love to ask you, you're based in our co-working space, and it's great to have you and the team here, but what are some of your favourite elements being a part of the space?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, it's tempting to list them all off, and I'm sure your other interviewees have done that. But I think the thing I keep coming back to is the architecture.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful building. And I make sure I really take note of that. Like I'll often walk up, as you know, I'll walk up your main entrance.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful open stairwell and it's got beautiful exposed brick.
Yeah.
And the sunlight's coming in the morning, and it's just such a beautiful way to start the day. Yeah, that's I guess one of the things that people maybe don't know about this space is how architecturally beautiful it is.
Yeah, so for the listeners who don't know, we're based in the Textile Centre, which is a historic building, but we're really lucky to be on the 4th floor, and the natural light is really, really nice, and you're right, in the morning it's lovely. The space was actually renovated, I think, earlier in 2021, so it looked a little bit different on the side the Icehouse sits, but it's an awesome space. Really cool, really special. One question I like to ask our co-working residents who come onto the podcast is to ask them who is an interesting person they've met in the space and why were they interesting.
Oh, see, that's so hard for me. I'm going to pick a team. Yeah, the Talent Army team are so lovely.
They are awesome.
They are nice people and really interesting. And they just made me feel really welcome right from the start. And, I love coming to your Friday night drinks, and usually the team from the Talent Army are there, and we just have such good banter and good chats and just kind of digest the week, and support each other in our endeavours that we're doing. They're just cool people. And I really love what they're doing in the recruitment world. There's, they're slightly different. I see from other recruiters, and I really kind of love their philosophy around how they work with people.
Yeah, awesome. I met Mitch recently, and he's an awesome guy. You should interview him for one of your podcasts. Yes, I definitely should. Mitch, if you're listening, you might be next. Coming back to your career, I just wanted to ask, what's a big win that you've had from your career journey so far?
Well, perfect timing, because just last week I hosted an event here in the Icehouse space.
Oh, yeah?
And it has been on my bucket list for a long, long time to deliver a keynote speech.
Amazing.
So I talk a lot to groups all the time. I've done that for my whole career. But I had this mental blocker about being a public speaker or a keynote speaker or an expert speaker. I had this mental blocker, and I thought, well, the only way to overcome that is to host an event, stand at the front of the room, deliver what would be a keynote speech, and gauge the reaction and see how much I enjoy doing it. And I loved it so much. Awesome. But it was amazing to be in this space. And, having a sound technician, having a good photographer, hiring an event planner, I think they were absolutely essential. And then I could just focus on, doing my bit. And it's kind of, it's sad, isn't it, when you overcome a big mental block like that to achieve one of your goals. You know what the first thing was I thought?
What was it?
Why didn't I do this 10 years ago? And I've got to just kind of let that go and go, well, I'm here now, I've levelled up, and I just feel like there's going to be so many more opportunities next year, and I'm really excited.
Wow. Yeah, everyone always thinks, right, when they do something, why didn't I just do this earlier?
I know, why was I so scared?
When you do it and you get through it, you're like, oh, that actually wasn't that bad.
I was nervous, because you're quite vulnerable.
Yes, of course.
If you're failing in a room full of 60 people. So you are really vulnerable being a public speaker, and there's you want to make it interesting and practical and key takeaways and take people on a journey. So there's a lot of elements to it that you have to consider. But I think I'd put in a lot of time and effort into what I wanted to say. So I was really happy with it.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome. And good on you for, bringing on an event planner and a professional photographer, videographer. It all makes a big difference. It can be hard, I think, being in a small team when you try to do everything, and it's difficult to just dive into what you're trying to do when you have to also juggle all that, all those elements. So awesome.
Yeah, and I think all those details, like what wine glasses to put out, how the Eventbrite ticketing system works, it just would have overwhelmed me.
Oh, yeah.
And I just needed to not think about those. That was a massive win.
Yeah, they're all important parts to juggle, but it's just nice to have someone else to help. So that's awesome. Good on you.
I've got an amazing team. They were all very supportive all night as well.
Yeah, oh, awesome. Love that. On the other side of a big win, what's a big learning you've had from your career journey so far? And off the back of that, what's advice you would give to your younger self?
That's such a great question. One of the things that's really on my mind a lot lately is creating meaningful connection. That's something I've had to work really hard at doing myself, because when I'm struggling with my mental health, my tendency is to shut down and pull back and not tell people how I'm feeling, and actually that just creates this downward spiral. So I really have to encourage, foster meaningful connection in my own lives. But actually what worries me is that if we look at the research, loneliness is on the rise. So supposedly we're never more connected than ever before, but we're more lonely than ever before, and I find that really worrying. And if you look at the research around what loneliness is, it's not about being on your own or being with people. It's about not feeling seen, heard and understood in a way that is meaningful for you. And that doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be when you go to your local coffee shop in the morning and you get a coffee, having a bit of banter with the barista while you're waiting for your coffee, or, if you take your dog for a morning walk around the park, the beautiful broad smile of the other dog walkers as they walk past you. But it's just those moments. And I think during lockdown, we, especially, the long lockdowns, we felt the pain of disconnection, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I remember that really, really vividly. And actually, I've got a bit of a funny story. So I was sent out to do the shopping one day, and I went to the local New World. And as I walked in and looked down the fruit and produce aisle, I saw someone I knew. One of my son's friends was working there because he was an essential worker. And I was so excited. I was rushing up to him, "Hey, how's it going? How are your family?" And I had what I thought was a lovely conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get home, open the front door, my son's standing there going, "Mum, I can't believe you just jump scared my friend and then stared into his soul. You totally freaked him out."
Oh, you were desperate for that connection.
So desperate. Maybe I overdid it a little bit. But on a more serious note, that is something I care very deeply about, and it's something that I think we're losing, that ability to really connect meaningfully. So that would be one piece of advice and one kind of life lesson. And then the other one is, I guess, managing the inner critic. And a lot of the advice we're given is, just ignore it, push it away, block it. And I found from my own experience, actually, that doesn't work. I suffered from postnatal depression after the birth of my daughter, and it went undiagnosed for quite a long time, so it was really, really hard for me. And when I was on that path to recovery, one of the best things I ever did was see a counsellor. And I said to her, "Look, I just had these overwhelming feelings of sadness, and I don't know where they were coming from." And she said, "Every time you have those feelings, write down what's going on in your head, write down what you're saying to yourself." So I carried around this little pink Smiggle notebook with me, and every time I felt that overwhelming sadness, I would write down what I was saying to myself in my head for a whole week. And at the end of the week, I opened it up and I read it. I was so shocked at how horrible I was to myself.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't believe the nasty, I would never talk to any of my friends like that.
Right, yeah.
But the other massive insight was I also felt deep compassion for the part of me that had to listen to that, that was tormented by that.
Yeah.
It's horrible. And so I was really motivated then to understand a bit more about this role of the inner critic.
Yeah.
And actually what people probably don't realise is, for many of us, that factory setting inner critic, that niggly inner critic that likes to undermine our confidence, doesn't want us to step outside the square, doesn't want us to take risks, it actually is a little bit of an inbuilt factory setting. And if you think about it, our ancient ancestors back in the day, they banded together in tribes to be safe. if you did something to be ostracised or rejected, you were cast out and you would likely die because you couldn't fend for yourself. So we have this innate tendency to kind of not put ourselves out there.
Yeah.
But if we can just recognise that that's there and that voice is there and acknowledge it, and work alongside it and not let it stop us, that I think that's a much better strategy than avoiding or suppressing or believing it as the absolute truth that there's no way you could ever do that. Like if I'd listened to that voice, there's no way I would have done half the things that I'd done. But in the workshops that we run, the analogy we use is welcome to the party inner critic. Welcome to the party anxiety.
Cool.
Like we've got these other parts of us that are encouraging, that are courageous, that want to express themselves, and the inner critic is really just one of those parts. And so we often say, welcome to the party inner critic. Grab a lemonade and sit in the corner. We don't want the inner critic to take over our whole mindset.
Wow, that is really amazing. I love how you said when you had that realization after reading your Pink Smiggle book about everything you had said to yourself, and you realized that, wow, I would not speak to a friend like this. It's quite common, isn't it? We're so quick to speak down on ourselves, but we would never, ever even imagine speaking to someone else like that. So why do we treat ourselves differently? We're no less valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the powerful learning for me for this was that kind of blocking that voice doesn't work because it just gets louder. Like it'll just find another way. Like you might end up having a panic attack or something. So kind of acknowledging it and going, I can see where that you're coming from. This is a safety. It's paradoxically trying to keep you safe. Don't put your head up. I'm going to keep you safe by stopping you from taking risks. So I think it's about acknowledging it. But not letting it trash the party.
Awesome. No, I love that. That's great advice. I wanted to finish off with this question. What advice do you have for people navigating how to improve mental well-being and performance at work, particularly with the year drawing to an end? It's a common theme, that people are hearing. You're hearing about people feeling tired and, ready to have a break. What advice do you have for people who are navigating that space?
I'd like to actually make a call out to the leaders of teams, the people leaders, because I just think they have such an influential role, especially at this time of year. We are a little bit all exhausted and tired and looking forward to a break, but I just think leaders have such a powerful role, in this and supporting the well-being of their team. And I think we should never underestimate the power of that connection between leaders and their employees. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is we often see, mental well-being or looking after people's well-being as a bit of an indulgence and a nice to have. But actually the return on investment for supporting people's well-being is actually, I was just having a look at some stats that I wanted to share today. There's a piece of research done recently by Deloitte UK, and they've done some research that has said for every dollar you invest in well-being, you get $5 back.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just think for leaders to see that investment in well-being as a strategic advantage, rather than a cost to the organisation.
Yeah. Wow. And actually, I said last question, but there was one question I did want to ask you before that. What's in store for the future of BlueSkyMinds?
Yeah, well, I think just following on from that last question is lots of the organisations that we work with are really thinking about how they support leaders.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about supporting them to do that. So helping leaders to embed really good wellbeing strategies to optimise their healthy minds and high performance at work, but also helping them to have more meaningful conversations with their team, especially if their team is struggling with their mental health. Because one of the things I've noticed is sometimes leaders are reluctant to engage in those conversations. They're not quite sure if they're scared of saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, they're not quite sure what advice they should give.
Yeah.
You know, they've almost been, you can overthink it. And so part of what I want to do is really support leaders to feel confident going into those conversations and just realise it's just about being human.
Yeah.
Just listening for the sake of listening and just being your empathetic self.
Yeah.
You don't need to diagnose or rescue or problem solve or coach, but actually just create meaningful connection and try and understand what's going on in someone else's world if they're struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about supporting our organisation and their organisations and their leaders. But obviously the other thing is with my public speaking now.
Yeah.
I'm really keen to do more of that at conferences and
Awesome.
offsites and events next year. So any listeners out there who know any conferences next year, let me know.
Cool.
Just
Well,
trying
we
to
can
spread
pop
the
your
word.
details with the podcast copy, so if people want to get in touch, they can. But that is so awesome, and that is so valuable for people to know that there are other people out there who are offering that help. So, I think that's really valuable, especially going forward. It's just going to be more and more valuable, so good on you. But I've really, really enjoyed talking to you, Debbie, and hearing more about your story, and I'm really looking forward to following the BlueSkyMinds journey and seeing what more unfolds in the upcoming year. And we love having you in the space.